Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn is the latest DC movie to come out and has one of the longest titles in a while. And because of that, I'm just going to shorten it to just Birds of Prey for the rest of the review. So, Birds of Prey is directed by Kathy Yan and stars Margot Robbie, Rosie Perez, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Journey Smollett-Bell, Ewan McGregor, Ella J. Basco, Chris Messina, and that's just to name the big main characters of the movie. And this follows in the latest DCEU movies as kind of being standalone while having hints to movies like Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman, and kind of goes for something different. And with that, this is a girl-powered action comedy that sees the Birds of Prey try to save this young girl from the clutches of the crime lord Black Mask. And coming out the theater, I can say this is a good time with funny moments, great action, while not trying to be anything it's not setting out to be. And that is fueled by some of Birds of Prey's greatest characters like Harley Quinn, Huntress, and the Black Mask. I feel that these three characters are the MVPs in this movie as they kind of steal the scene that they're in. They have some really funny lines, and with those funny lines, they all have their own sense of humor. However, I don't think Black Mask and Victor Zsasz were great villains as they weren't as menacing as their comic counterparts. They kind of have a few scenes to show that they are the bad guys and they do bad things, but it doesn't really go deeper than that. You just go with it because they're bad, and they have like a scene or two where they do pretty violent things, but they're just not too memorable. And speaking of violent, this is probably the second most violent DC movie just next to Watchmen, because there's scenes of people's face getting cut off, there's bones being broken, sometimes in slow motion, headshots, hand-to-hand combat, and stuff like that. It's all filmed in wides where you can see everything happening, and it really has some of the greatest action scenes that the DCEU has offered so far. And that's probably thanks to Chad Stahelski, who you might know from the John Wick franchise, who they brought him in to help on the fights during reshoots, and you can tell because the fights are not similar to John Wick, but in the vein of John Wick where it's filmed in wides and everything is just like kind of brutal. As far as jokes go, I think most of it landed. I found myself chuckling throughout, and my audience seemed to find it very funny as well. But in terms of negatives, I do have a few complaints about Birds of Prey. I felt that the second act did drag a bit after the kind of fast-paced first act and the action-filled third act. They slowed down the second act to explain a lot about what's happening and backstories for certain characters, and just to overall strengthen the bonds between the characters. And before I go deeper into that, I just wanted to say that the first two acts of this movie are kind of told out of order. They bounce back and forth quite a bit, and at times it kind of is jarring because they cut away for like 15-20 minutes and you come back and you kind of forgot what took place when and where. And by the time you put the timeline together in your head, the second act is really just a place for Birds of Prey to pour exposition over your head and really just kind of take a really long breather between action scenes. But it was a good place for character building, which is essential, but it didn't really approach it in the best way. But by the third act, it does pick back up with the Birds of Prey finally assembling, and it leads to a very enjoyable, action-filled final act. However, I feel that the final encounter with Black Mask was a little bit disappointing. I thought it would go a little bit bigger, but it kind of kept it small and contained, and didn't really offer the payoff that I wanted. However, I wanted to point out that Black Mask never wears his iconic white suit with the Black Mask at the same time in this movie. He wears them both, but at different times. I don't know why they did that, but it's kind of weird. Because the ending is kind of dark, and he just wears his black suit with a black mask, and he doesn't really stand out. And that's actually kind of disappointing because the rest of the film actually has a lot of colors that pop in terms of powder or the outfits that our characters wear. So overall, Birds of Prey isn't a bad movie, it's not a great movie, it's a very fun movie that I think a lot of people enjoy. So with that, I'm going to give Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn a 7 out of 10. But in terms of DCEU films, I wouldn't put this up there with like Shazam or Wonder Woman or even Man of Steel. But I do think it is better than Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman, as well as Justice League actually. Yeah, I would put this kind of next to Aquaman. And if you are looking for a movie to watch this weekend, Birds of Prey is definitely worth a look if you are interested. And I think that's about it. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.